it's your girl Brady Shanae, and today is my stop for Hear Voices book tour, and I'm going to be doing a book review for Untethered, and this is by Angela Jackson Brown. So I have recently read this. I wanted it to be fresh in my mind before I provided this book review for you all. And this is my first book by Angela Jackson Brown. After reading this, I do plan on reading her other works because this was very phenomenal. It was heart-wrenching. It was heartwarming. And it made me think about a lot of things that are still happening today in 2024. And so within this book, this is pretty much like historical fiction. This is set between the years of 1967 and 1968. And if you look closely and pay more attention to those dates that I provided you, those are the years during the time of the Vietnam War. So just keep that in mind. And so we have the main character name is Kasia. And she has two brothers that are Marines that are in the Vietnam War. And this is going to be located in Troy, Alabama, so in the South. And she is also a director of a group home. And so within this book, mind you, this is in the 60s. In the group home that she works at, it's technically called a group home for Negro boys. Literally, it says that. So just keep that in mind. There are a lot of racist things that do occur in this book. So keep that in mind. And then we see a broken system that is still broken to this very day. And so not only is she like the director of this group home, but she also not only worry about her twin brothers in the war, but she also worries about her mother, and her mother also pressures her about finding a man so she can have grandchildren, even though the main character Kasia, she can't have biological children because she had gotten hysterectomy, if I'm saying that correctly. Ugh. Sorry, it's been a long day. But so we have Kasia, who has a lot on her shoulders, has so much pressure. She's trying to keep everything together. She's trying to help these young men to become great, successful men and, out into the world, where she loves these kids. Now, she loves these young men, though she tries not to have a huge connection with them because they're not her children, and she tries not to have a close relationship with them, but I know that's hard and it's easier said than done. Of not having a relationship with these young men. And so, but she like deep down, like she really does care about these children and their well-being. She even has a wall of fame or honor or whatever, where it shows all the boys that came from that group home and what they have done. Some went to Harvard, went to a lot of colleges and stuff like that, and become very successful. And she plans to do the exact same things with the boys that she has currently in her group home by educating them, making sure they're able to read. She does everything they can to make sure they are in a good place, and to also help them like mentally as well. So you have that. And two of the main boys that we see within the group home that she takes care of is Pee-wee. Also, his real name is Mason. And then we also have Chad. And with Chad, they recently received some news talking about his mom wants him back. And Katia, she was very upset because before they talk to any of the boys that are in the group home, they have to come through her first, which I appreciated. And the people that work in that group home with her, that she helps, guide them, since she is the director, she tries to let them know, like, if any type of social work come in here, first they got to talk to me. They cannot talk to any of these boys whatsoever. And, they decided not to do that. And so Chad was very upset. He's like, I do not want to go back to Lena. I do not want to go back to Lena, which is his mom's name. And so Katia told the social worker, like, no, that's not going to happen. We can go through the courts, because the social worker would say, well, the mom wants him and she's been clean for the past like 3 to 6 months or whatever. And so she's like, nope, we're going to go through the courts first and have the process, which usually takes a very long time to do. But apparently they were speeding it up a little bit anyways. And just seeing Chad just be heartbroken and not wanting to leave the group home, and just lets you know how traumatized he has been. He had been through a lot there's also going to be content warnings in this particular book, where one of the boys was molested as well. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of things that is content warnings within this book. So just be aware of that, like racism, molestation, child abuse, abduction, and so on. So just keep that in mind as you read this book. And so Katya has a lot going on, and then she has her mom, where she's trying to keep her mom together. And I think what her mom does in order to distract herself from thinking about her her sons in Vietnam, she's like, you need to fix your hair is nappy. Now, mind you, I feel like that's a lot. That is still a thing even today in 2024, where a lot of, old school moms say that your hair is nappy, you need to get a straightening comb or whatever, hot iron comb or whatever, and straighten it up, because she was telling her, when you were a kid I would always do that. And with Katya, she has like a fro, and I'm like, oh, that's beautiful, but in her mom's point of view, in her mom's eyes, that's considered nappy. And that's just not the thing. Like, even for me, like, my mom says, when are you gonna take your locks out, not knowing about anything about the lock journey and the journey that I'm currently on. And she's like, I just don't like them. You have beautiful hair. And I was like, I have beautiful hair now. There's nothing wrong with this at all. There's nothing wrong with locks. My mom is old school. She feels like flat ironing your hair is more neat and appropriate looking. And yeah, my mom's old school. I love her dearly. Try to help her out a little bit, but she's still stuck in her ways of the past, and I feel like that's also the thing with Katya and her mom. Her mom is like, okay, well, you need to fix your hair up so you can go ahead and find a man or whatever, which Katya has this one, I wouldn't say a boyfriend, but like an associate, I guess, where they're on and off again, but she didn't really care for him. His name is Leon. And so come to find out, there's other things that took place, which was very shocking to me, because Leon didn't really want Katya either. He wanted someone else. So that was a mind-blowing factor in the book, and that was pretty cool. I don't want to give a lot of spoilers out, because there's a lot of things that happen within this book that I think you all should read for yourselves. It's a really quick, fast-paced book. It's never like a slow moment. We discover so many things, and we learn so many things about Katya, and how you realize like there's no one there ever taking care of her. She's taking care of anyone. She has a lot of weight on her shoulders, and she tries not to be vulnerable, which is very hard to do when you're a director of a group home and you're making sure you keep your mind intact because your brothers are in the war, and then something else takes place, and then you're trying to not freak out. It's just a lot. And so later on in the book, she does break down, but I think that happens when we put so much pressure on ourselves and so much weight, which I feel like as women and Black women, we do that a lot, and we don't give ourselves grace. I try to remind myself to give myself grace now and then, because it's so much pressure. It's so much, and that's why I just really enjoyed this book. This book is so realistic in its own way. I feel like with everything that's happening in this book, it's still relevant today as well. I also want to read the author note as well. I feel like providing the author note, it gives you an insight of what you're going to be getting from the book and from the author. So it says, "Dear reader, this book was very different from previous books I have written. Yes, Untethered is historical fiction since it was set in 1967 through 1968, but it wasn't my usual historical novel. This book was far more focused on the human experiences than it was on the time frame or historical figures of the day, except for the phenomenal and incomparable Nina Simone." Now I'm going to pause right there. So Nina Simone is also mentioned in this book, which is phenomenal. I feel like within the Black community, music is just like, it's a powerful thing, that it's a staple. I feel that we have, it's like, I know like music, like in all different cultures, is so uplifting, and it's something, right? But especially in the Black community, music is very, very crucial, and it's very dear to our hearts. And so when I saw that Nina Simone was referenced in this book a lot, I'm like, yes. But anyway, let me continue. So it says, note, I did bend historical details a bit by having Nina Simone appear in concert in Mobile, Alabama. This concert did not happen, but Simone was on tour at that time, and the playlist I used for her was based on her actual concert playlist. Of course, there were some people that I consulted, such as good family friend, Dr. Kathy J. Pendleton, and former schoolmate, Penny Baker. I'm also grateful for their invaluable knowledge of the inner workings of the foster care system and group homes. Another thing, when I mentioned that it's still broken, it to this day, it really is. Like within, like this social worker that wanted Chad to go back to his mom, she didn't care about his well-being. They feel like our Black boys, our Black young men are just they can just dispose them whenever they want. They're expendable. They don't matter. And I feel like for Katya, she was letting these young men know that you do matter, regardless of what the system said, regardless of what the world says, you still matter. And that's what I loved about this book the most. But anyway, let me continue. It says, if there were any mistakes or misrepresentations, please chalk that up to me. To orient myself to the Child Protective Services industry, I read Helping in Child Protective Services, a competency based casework handbook edited by Charmaine R. Britton, MSW, PhD, and Deborah Iqbal Hunt, LCSW, PhD. I also consulted the following books from the Vietnam War, specifically how it related to African American soldiers fighting on two fronts, African Americans and the Vietnam War by James E. Westhider, The African American Experience in Vietnam, Brothers in Arms by James E. Westhider, and Black Veterans of the Vietnam War, an Oral History by Wallace Terry. And of course, I immersed myself in newspapers and memoirs. One memoir in particular was Ward of the State, a memoir of foster care by Carlos Dillard. I also appreciated reading Elliot Glover's story in Those Boys on the Hill. So this book right here, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved it so much. So like I said, I do plan on reading more of Angela's works, all her other previous books, which I see here where there's one called Homeward, The Light Always Breaks, and When Stars Rain Down. So I do plan on reading her backlist. I just found this very refreshing and beautiful. It tells you about how to be, eventually you can break any moment based on, everything, everything crumbling down in front of you, and you feel like, well, how is this happening? I'm staying strong. I'm keeping myself together. Like, why is this all happening? And she does break down. And I think that's what happens in real life. We put so much on ourselves, we end up breaking down. But I really enjoyed this book so much. I had a great time with it. I read it like, if I didn't have to work, I could have read it in just one sitting, but I read it in 2 days, which that's still pretty good for me. I took my time reading it. I did some tabbing as well, because I found like some of these moments in this book was very good. Like, for instance, I'll even quote it. This is on page 10. It says, I learned a long time ago that if the boys thought I was vulnerable to their tears and tantrums, they'd try to railroad me with their sob stories. God knows that every one of these boys had reasons to be angry. None of them had good stories. Almost every boy came from a home filled with drugs and abuse, and while I always wanted to honor their truths, I didn't want those truths to become crutches. I was determined for these boys to leave the group home stronger and better than they were when they arrived. That didn't always happen, yet I worked my butt off to make sure it happened for as many boys as possible. So that just lets you know how dedicated she was to these boys. And how she wanted them to be in safe spaces. Now, usually when they are sent off to the world saying that, oh, they want your parents want you back, even though they didn't really go through the courts and the process that was supposed to take, Katya made sure that the boys, before they left that group home or the foster care or whatever, that they were in a safe space and safe environment before they left, because she didn't want them to have to go through that hell again. She did not want to do that. And it even says right here, for instance, when I told you about the social worker coming to get Chad and everything, it says, they always wanted to hurry up and wash their hands of Negro boys like Chad. If Chad were white, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Mrs. Gates never would have tried to bypass me, and she absolutely would not. She would want to ensure that Chad was returning to a safe environment. As overworked as she was, I knew she'd make the extra effort to try to protect a white child. I've seen it time and time again. And then it says, everyone who worked in this field had unrealistic caseloads. So when it came down to who got sacrificed, they would rather it be the Negro children, which still happens today in 2024. So I feel like I really, really, really recommend this book if you haven't picked it up yet. Like I said, this is my first time reading a book by Angela Jackson Brown, and I'm glad that I was able to be a part of this amazing book tour in order to read this phenomenal book. But once again, I highly recommend that you read this. This was definitely a 4-star for me, and I really enjoyed this book. Thank you so much for watching this book review, and I really do hope you pick this book up, because it definitely was. It was beautiful. But thank you so much for watching my book review. I hope you are staying healthy and staying safe, and I will catch y'all next time. Bye, everyone.